Hi, and welcome to the Hegel Listening Lab in Oslo in Norway. Today we're going to talk about our reference preamplifier and power amplifier, the P30A and H30A. This is the P30A. This is our reference preamplifier. It's an all-analog design, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it works, its features, and why it sounds like it sounds. But I can tell you already, the key is advanced simplicity. On the surface, the P30A looks rather simple, but the entire casing is made out of solid aluminium. The front panel is milled out of one piece of aluminium, as is the knobs. A benefit of aluminium, other than just looking good, is that there is no magnetic interference with the internal of the amplifier. A special feature you'll see that indicates it's a reference product is this little piece on top of the front panel. You find that on the P30A, the H30A, the Viking CD player, as well as the D50DA converter. The controls of the P30A is rather simple. On the right, you have a volume attenuator switch. On the left, there's the input selector, and then there's the on and off button here in the bottom center. On the back side of the amplifier, you'll find all the inputs. First of all, you have the mains input. Then there is a trigger in and output. This can be used to either have the amplifier be powered on from an external source or power on and off the power amplifier. Then comes the outputs. There's a pair of variable balanced outputs. There is a variable RCA output and a fixed level RCA output. Further, the inputs, there are two pairs of fully balanced analog inputs and three normal RCA unbalanced inputs. At the end, there is a so-called home theater input. On the home theater input, you're bypassing the volume control in the P30A, allowing you to integrate it seamlessly in a home theater system. If you require to have that home theater input as a normal RCA input, that can also be arranged, but the amplifier will need to go to your dealer or to a repair center to set it up as a normal variable input. An important note on the home theater input is that it doesn't bypass it in a way that the volume is now on absolute 100%. It will be at about 85%, which both protects your speakers and makes it a little bit easier to integrate seamlessly in that home theater system. The reason people are choosing the P30A isn't because it's an array of inputs and outputs, nor is it because of the volume control. It's because of what is going on the inside. Initially, I said the P30A is all about advanced simplicity. By simplicity, I mean that the signal path inside the P30A is extremely short. The music signal will pass through very, very few components on its way out to the power amplifier, meaning the P30A will add extremely little of itself in the sound you experience. The first thing that happens when the signal comes into the P30A is the gain stage. And we use very specific FET transistors that are hand-matched in perfect pairs. It takes about 100 single FET transistors to find that perfect pair that matches together. And that is the entire amplifying section of the preamplifier. The next stage the signal is going through is the volume attenuator. When at first you touch and feel the volume dial on the P30A, it feels very much like an old school pot meter. And actually it is, but it's not in the signal path at all. The volume attenuator on the front, on the pot meter, only reports what the volume settings should be. And it reports that to our digitally controlled, fully analog volume attenuator. The volume attenuator in the P30A is actually repurposed chips, originally designed for high-frequency measuring equipment. They're ultra-silent, ultra-precise, and that's exactly what you need from a volume attenuator in a high-performance, high-end preamp. The P30A is also the only preamplifier we have that uses the sound engine modules. There's actually 4 sound engine modules inside a P30A. They're configured and set up a little bit differently compared to our power amplifiers, but it's there and it's ensuring the very precise operation of the preamplifier. Another part that we spent a lot of time with, and that was both in terms of listening, but also measurement, of course, was power supplies. There's an ultra-silent main power supply in the P30A, but The power supplies that works just for the volume attenuator is equally important. We spent a lot of time going back and forth with different components and various implementations of these chips that actually control the volume regulation. And the key, when we ended up with what is now the P30A, that was the last pieces of the puzzle that made everything really come together. The final thing I want to mention on the P30A design is the very special gain stage. I talked about the FET transistors and everything. I also said that these FET transistors are very much like tubes. And with this perfect pairing of FET transistors in the gain stage, the whole P30A only generates second and third harmonic distortion. There's no higher order harmonic distortion in this preamplifier whatsoever. That is very unique for a solid state preamplifier. As a final note, we should also mention something we get asked a lot. Why doesn't it have a display? Well, the P30A is a racehorse preamplifier. Displays, even though they could be very silent, they could be the most silent display you ever find, they do generate a little bit of noise that interferes with the circuitry of the preamplifier. And that's the only reason we've left the display out. What does a P30A sound like? My colleague will probably say it sounds like nothing.
It sounds like nothing.
And I have to agree, but it obviously sounds like something. There's something you experience when you're putting a P30A into your system. The first thing I felt when we put the final version, which is now the production version of the P30 into a system, is that my shoulders dropped. It's so calm, it's so unassuming, while at the same time it provides such good texture to voices. It's like the guitar actually has a case on it. There is a sense of the room you're sitting in. It's all because it's so low noise. There's no high frequency noise or high frequency distortion whatsoever. So it's just a smooth elegance to the sound. That is very much how I personally would describe a P30A's sound. Why would you choose a P30A? Why would I choose a P30A? Why would anyone choose to have a preamplifier at all and not an integrated amplifier or just a passive volume control or a DAC with a volume control attached to it? Well, first and foremost, it's much more silent. In a separate cabinet, the preamplifier is not so much affected by the big output stages and big power supplies and transformers in a power amp. Secondly, it's better at driving power amplifiers than a passive volume control is. And it doesn't compress the signal like most digital volume controls does. So it's more dynamics, it's more control in short. Of course, I'm biased, but there's a quality that whenever I walk into a room and I haven't listened to the P30A and H30A combination for a long time ago, like, wow, it's just there. There's a presence and the musicality that is unheard of. It's a racehorse product. There are some things with color displays and whatever that it doesn't have, but it has got that sound. I would choose this preamplifier over any preamplifier whatsoever. And now on to Andreas.
This is our reference power amplifier, the H30A. It offers 1100 watts in mono into 8 ohms, about 1.5 horsepower. And in stereo, because it can of course also be used in stereo, it offers over 300 watts into stereo. It is a massive beast of an amplifier that can drive any speaker you would like. Let's check it out. So the whole amplifier is built to be as sturdy and noise-free as possible. That goes for the inside, but also the outside. So the panels here are made of thick aluminum, the top panel as well. And the front panel is actually 4 centimeters thick milled aluminum for the front face here. We also have this nice little power button on the front, which gives a satisfying click when you turn it on. All Hegel products are of course quite minimalist in the way they look, but on our reference products we've added this little notch to make them stand out from the rest of our lineup. On the backside of the amp, you have a few connectors available to you. The first thing you will notice is that the backside has 3 pairs of inputs and speaker terminals. That's because the 2 outer pairs are used when it's used in stereo mode, and the inner pair of speaker terminals and connectors is used when using it in mono. This completely separates the 2 ways of connecting the amplifier. Of course, the amplifier is designed as a mono amplifier, and that's when it sounds the absolute best. But it's not far off in stereo either. When connecting, you have the choice between either unbalanced RCA cables or balanced XLR cables. We highly recommend you use balanced XLR cables if possible. These 2 inputs cannot be used at the same time. They're physically switched between with this little switch on the backside. So you need to choose which route you want to go. But as I said, all Hegel products should be connected with XLR when possible. You will also find a stereo and mono switch. Make sure you choose which setup you are connecting it to before powering the amplifier on. The amplifier also has a 12-volt trigger input and output for control from a preamp or other connected devices. So we already mentioned that it is 1100 watts into 8 ohms, which is insane. But more than that, it is also stable down to 1 ohm loads. That's both in mono and in stereo, which means it can handle speakers that dips a lot and is hard to drive for an amplifier. The H30A gets its power from 2 big toroidal transformers of 1000 volt amperes each. We use 2 transformers because it minimizes transformer hum and it makes them more snappy and fast. All Hegel amplifiers use custom-made Hegel capacitors. Now, this one has a bit more than any of our other products. It actually has a capacitor bank of 270,000 microfarads, which means that it always has power on hand for even the most complex music or the most complex speaker you connect to it. Another critical piece of the amplifier is, of course, the output transistors. This amplifier uses 56 15 ampere 200 watt high-speed ultra-low distortion bipolar transistors. What does all that mean? They are really, really good. In the critical input and voltage gain stages of this amp, we use FET transistors. These are carefully hand-matched, so they have the exact same values, meaning they have no higher order harmonic distortion at all. So what does actually all this technology we've been talking about sound like? Well, the best way I can describe it is it sounds like nothing. And that's a bit weird to say, but hear me out. So the amplifier has all the power you would ever need. It has so many layers of detail, and it just produces this in a non-obtrusive way. It doesn't add any flavor to the music at all. It just brings out the music, straightforward, no filter. And it just is. Everything comes to life in a very, very satisfying way. And you listen to it, and you're just in the music. So why would anyone choose this amplifier? I might be a bit biased. It says Hegel on my shirt, but it's one of the absolute best amplifiers there is or has ever been. It is extremely good. Thank you for watching this video about our P30A and H30A reference pre and power combo. These are amazing products, but they're not available at every Hegel dealer. So check out your nearest dealer at hegel.com and find the reference dealer near you where you can audition these. Or go to one of the shows where they're often auditioned, because these are truly, truly worth a listen.